Hey everyone, my name is Kay, and this is Dark Tales from the Road. Hey everybody, thank you so much for joining me today. Before we get started, I just have a quick podcast that I would love to introduce you guys to if you're not already listening. It is the Graveyard Girls. You will love them unconditionally. Sorry about my dogs. They have the creepiest stories. They do amazing series and they are so great together. The chemistry is just perfect. So definitely check them out wherever you get your podcasts and on social media. Here is a quick trailer from them.
Hey, it's the Graveyard Girls, a true crime and mysteries podcast.
Join us every Tuesday and Thursday for a mixture of true crime, mysteries and conspiracy theory cases. And you can also find us on Patreon on Wednesdays where we cover a variety of historical cases. So we hope you'd like to join us
In our cozy crypt.
in our cozy crypt. In the meantime,
Keep creeping.
and we'll keep digging.
Awesome, guys. I'm so excited for you to check them out. They have been one of my favorites for so long. I love these gals. So, if you're new to the podcast, I always start with a history of the state that we are in, the history of the city that we're in, and then the history and spookiness of the subject. So today we are heading to North Dakota. We're going to be in the town of Dunseith in Rolette County. I hope I said that correctly. And we're going to be exploring the San Haven Sanatorium. So this place has had a lot of names, but Zach Baggins, he calls it the Dakota's Sanatorium of Death. Yes, I know there's been a lot of controversy lately with Zach and Ghost Adventures and another TV show and Nick Groff, but that is not my business. I don't really care to know what's happening. It's just kind of going crazy in the media, but you know, I enjoy the show Ghost Hunters. I enjoyed Nick's shows and other show, but I really liked this episode, and so I wanted to show you the spookiness of it. So whether you're still into Ghost Adventures or all that, that's up to you. But you know, I like the show. I know Zach is probably a crazy egomaniac. You know, just look at him, guys. Just watch his manners. But, yeah, I decided, nah, I'm just going to keep going. So, I hope any of that rambling makes sense. Anyways, so we're going to start with a little history about North Dakota. I have only been to South Dakota, but I have a friend from North Dakota, and it does border the state of Montana, which I'm in currently. So, here's a little history. So, present-day Montana, the Europeans came in around the 1700s. They reached the territory of present-day North Dakota. I'm pretty sure I said Montana. My head's going crazy. And there were already people living in the region, a lot of Native American groups. I hope I say these correctly because I didn't look it up, the Mandan, the Hidatsa, oh gosh, and the Arikara. They were along the Mississippi River part, and the Ojibwe, also known as the Chippewa or the Anishinaabe, oh gosh, and the Cree were in the northeast, and then different Sioux groups were in the north and southeast and the west. So the first permanent trading post was established in 1801. During that time was when Lewis and Clark arrived in the Native American villages of the Mandan and Hidatsa, in 1801, which is present-day Bismarck. And it was all very friendly, and then they helped to construct Fort Mandan nearby, and that's where they spent the winter in 1804 to 1805. So North Dakota was a part of the Louisiana Purchase. It's crazy how far it stretched. And then coming into like the 1820s and 30s, that's when a lot of American traders came into play here, and it made a huge impact on the area. They brought in guns, kettles, blankets, axes, liquor, and also major diseases. We know that has wiped out tribes like crazy. And so the Native Americans, they were very dependent on these people to help supply their tribe. With all that came in, they were slowly dying. And smallpox came into play. And so the Mandan population, it went from about 1,800 to 125 in just a few months. That's insane. Like, they never had these same diseases and they thrived, and then here come all the Europeans and it's just everybody's dying off. It's so sad. It was also part of the Minnesota and Nebraska territories. Then eventually they split them into North and South Dakota, but that area at the time was known as the Dakota Territory around the 1860s. And not very many people lived there, very sparsely populated until the railroads came through in the late 1800s, and then it became a state in 1889. So along that railroad, there were new towns everywhere, and they needed crews and people to help lay track, and so they were booming, but a lot of that came with violence. And during that time, the cities of Fargo and Bismarck were really known for being a rough area because of the railroad communities there. In 1862, the federal homestead law came into play, and so farming settlement just started to grow and grow and grow. The Dakota Territory, which is north and south, was established in 1861, and then in 1889, they were divided. And so then North and South Dakota were admitted into the Union then in 1889. And like with all this settlement coming in, the railroad, people flocking, especially during like the California and Montana gold boom, their population skyrocketed to upwards of 100,000 people in the Dakota Territories. The state is known for its Badlands, which is part of the Theodore Roosevelt National Park. And then again, another settlement boom happened in the early 1900s, and after that, the population went from 100,000, 200,000, all the way up to 650,000 people by 1920. And then a lot of them were immigrants from like Scandinavia and German area. North Dakota's always been known for its agriculture, and they've also been known by mechanizing it and finding easier ways to farm, and farms were getting a lot bigger. But they were also losing their rural population, and then when the automobile really came into play, again, more and more people coming in. After World War II was when the rural area started to have electricity. They were really big and strong on soil conservation, and that's when highways started being constructed through it also. And at the same time, it was becoming a huge oil production state about in the 1950s. Also in the 60s, they started building Air Force bases, missile sites, and different installations throughout the state for military. And the highway system was a huge part of that. Through the 1980s and 1990s, their economy was greatly affected by the pricing of fossil fuels and the pricing of agriculture products, and also came into play very bad weather. There had been crazy amounts of floods that kept coming through, especially there was one that was really bad in the 1990s. Also at that time, there was the Freedom of Farm Act where federal government was phasing out different subsidies over a 7-year period, and it had a huge impact on the state's agriculture and its economy. And then at the same time, they were downsizing the military installations that were there, especially the Air Force bases. And then well into the 21st century, flooding was causing so much disaster in the area. And it was, again, creating this huge impact on the small percentage of people that lived there, on their smaller economy, and affecting state income that really was driven by manufacturing and tourism. And then to make matters worse, it became a major issue in the area pertaining to teenage alcohol abuse and drug use, especially meth, and also gambling problems among adults. So the government in North Dakota was really struggling because of all these trends and downward trends, and really trying to get former residents to come back into the state to raise their family. But they're still working to this day to really overcome all these obstacles that have popped up around them. Here's some facts here. So North Dakota has attempted to drop the North and rename the state just Dakota. And they tried in the 50s and the 90s and it's been denied every time. In 1999, a teenager discovered a dinosaur mummy. It was on his uncle's ranch near Marmarth, and it's a 67 million year old duck-billed hadrosaur, and it was so well preserved in that area that a lot of the bones still had tendons and ligaments remaining on it. I didn't look at where that ended up, but crazy. Theodore Roosevelt was a huge part of North Dakota, especially in the Badlands. And so when he became the 26th president, he really pushed conservation, and that he was really the one to really establish national parks. And so they memorialized him by creating the Theodore Roosevelt National Park, and it has different units in North Dakota, and it covers 70,000 acres. The geographical center of North America has a 20-foot monument out of stone, and it is in Rugby, North Dakota. It says right outside of the town. And then agriculture is the leading industry in North Dakota. It employs 24% of the state's residents. It's a huge producer in all kinds of crops, but it's very much known for its canola and flaxseed. All right, let's move on. We're going to be going to Dunseith, North Dakota, and it's a very small town. There's not a lot about it. The population in 2020 was 632. It's known for its proximity to the International Peace Garden. It was a garden that was built part in North Dakota, part in Canada, to really show unity and peace. It is the home of the world's largest turtle sculpture. It's called Wheel Turtle, and it's made of more than 2,000 wheels that are painted green. So I love road trips that have all this craziness. In South Dakota, we saw like the world's largest pheasant. We saw the Corn Palace. Those are my favorite, even though my husband refuses to stop at any of them. But someday I'll get him. Dunseith was platted out in 1882, and it was founded by a man named William Dunseith Eaton. He was from Chicago, and then a post office was built in 1884, and it was incorporated in 1908. That's all I have on it, guys. It's a very small town up in North Dakota. So we're going to go ahead and get started. We are going to Sanhaven Sanatorium, also known as Sanhaven State Hospital and North Dakota Tuberculosis Sanitarium. This is an odd place and a lot of odd history to it. So North Dakota created a law to create more tuberculosis sanitariums and to help out the people affected with TB. And that was when it was known as North Dakota Tuberculosis Sanitarium, which was later changed to Sanatorium. So tuberculosis is also known as consumption, and it was the most serious epidemic that was going on at the time in the 19th and early 20th century because there was no cure, and that came in 1946. So it's pretty crazy how long this epidemic was going and how many lives it took. So when they were told they had TB, they were prescribed rest and fresh air. And so Sanhaven was constructed to meet that need. And in 1911, they chose Dunseith to facilitate a sanatorium. So Dunseith is near the south slope of the Turtle Mountains, and they liked it there because of the higher altitude. There was very less snowfall there, a very dry atmosphere, and so it was like perfect for the patients with TB. They opened in 1912, and then in 1915 they were given financial support from the legislature to help pay for it, but they were also collecting money from patients that, you know, you had to go in and pay to stay in there, to get treatment, all of that. And then the local county also came in and helped fund it. Excuse me. So it's a little confusing. I had to go back and redo this whole section because I was confused. So the administration of the sanatorium was transferred in 1911 from the original board to what was called the Board of Control. And then in 1973, it became a division of the Grafton School. So the Grafton State School is separate. It was a place that developmental disabled citizens could go to for treatment, like others we've talked about, where it's rehab, you know, to get out. And so it was an institution for the feeble-minded, and then it was changed to Grafton State School, then the North Dakota Institution for Feeble Minds, then the State Developmental Center, then the Developmental Center, or the North Dakota Developmental Center. It's had a million names, but in 2013 it was named Life Skills and Transition Center, and I believe it's still open. So this is what Grafton School has to do with it. A lot of the patients from there were, and other institutions, not just Grafton, were transferred to Sanhaven in around the 1950s, and they were treating tuberculosis there, but then they started remodeling to include the developmentally disabled and the elderly. And population was growing like crazy, and we all know when population is hitting its peak, things go wrong. And there was about a peak of 1,300 people that it was not built for. Again, antibiotics didn't come into play until 1946, and so about half of the TB patients died from the disease, and they were prescribed rest and fresh air, but they would also kind of experiment on them where they would surgically collapse a lung. There were probably a lot of other procedures that were not great. I've done other TB places, and they would try to do a lung transplant. They remove ribs and put pressure on it. It's not, the whole history of TB has some pretty dark parts to it. So then in 1971, that's when it was renamed from the North Dakota Tuberculosis Sanatorium to the Sanhaven State Hospital. And at that time, they were continuing to still treat patients with TB along with the developmentally disabled. And then they started really pushing, tuberculosis at some point definitely starting to fade away, and Sanhaven really got away from treating tuberculosis and letting the patients choose their own hospitals, their own treating physicians of their choice. So it was phased out, and then Sanhaven only provided care for the developmentally disabled. But the state was not helping to cover the costs of maintaining the facility. And so then a lot of interest started concerning if the developmentally disabled were being adequately taken care of. And then in 1980, there was a lawsuit between the North Dakota Association for Retarded Citizens and the state of North Dakota. And so the court actually ordered the place to modernize what they were doing to help the developmentally disabled residents really have an opportunity to live. So they wanted them to rehab them so that they can join their community again. Unfortunately, 1987 Sandhaven Hospital closed. It went through a couple hands, but then in 1992, the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa, the tribe, they purchased the property. So I have an article here. I've been doing this a little bit more of quoting full articles, but it's like I don't want to take bits and pieces. I love how the entire thing is written, and this is a really good one because there's firsthand knowledge of someone who was a patient at Sandhaven in the 60s. So I'm excited to do this one. So I'm quoting it word for word. The article is called Inside Sandhaven Sanatorium. It was published January of 2014 by a man named Troy Larson. This was on ghostsofnorthdakota.com. So, quote, "This website is a constant reminder of how things change over time. Those reminders frequently come in the form of a photograph that shows a crumbling structure, a little less stout than when we last photographed it. Sometimes, though, the reminders come in the form of a story, an email from a visitor. In this case, we received an email from a former 10-year-old patient at Sandhaven Sanatorium, and we're reminded that sometimes it's a change in our culture which leads to abandonment. Mary found our website and after perusing the Sandhaven galleries, sent us an email. Mary wrote, 'Your pictures brought back a lot of scary memories, none of them good. I was a patient at Sandhaven from March 1963 to July of 1963. So this is me talking now, not a huge time gap, but she definitely went through a lot in that short time.' So, continuing on. I was there. They thought I had TB because I reacted to the shot. Her email immediately got my attention, and I contacted Mary with the hope that she would share more of her story. Sandhaven was a tuberculosis sanatorium near Dunseith, founded in 1909, which eventually became a home for the developmentally disabled. It has frequently been the subject of controversy, usually a dispute between those who insist no wrongdoing or neglect ever took place at Sandhaven and those who want to make sure it never happens again. First-hand accounts from former patients could illuminate this conversation. I asked Mary to tell us more, and she started with, 'The day my mom and dad took me there, it was cold and it took 3 hours to drive there. I met the doctors and thought they talked funny. I didn't know that they were going to leave me there, even though they packed my dolls and some clothes. My mom wasn't sure they were even going to leave me there, so they left and said they would be back to see me the next day.' I asked Mary to explain this point. What kind of shot was she reacted to? When did she know that her mom and dad would be leaving her there? It was a TB scrape. They have an instrument with several needles. They pierce the forearm and wait 3 days if you react with a red spot. Then you have to have a chest x-ray to see if you have spots in your lungs. I have no idea why my mom did it to us kids. Maybe she heard it on TV that there was cases of TB and went to the doctor. After us 3 girls reacted, the whole school was tested as well as several other people. No one around here reacted, so the doctor said that us 3 girls may have been walking together and someone spit on the sidewalk that actually had TB and we contracted it. Interesting. That was one explanation. The doctor contacted the state AMA and they told him that we had to go to Sandhaven or Grand Forks because they were the only places that was close enough to go to. They knew that it was a possibility that I would have to stay there, but we weren't sure until we actually got there. The situation as it was, a 10-year-old girl quarantined for TB in a massive sanatorium 3 hours from home. So they took me to a room which held 3 bunk beds and 2 single hospital beds. I was on the second floor in the women's section. I was in a room with 6 other girls ranging from 9 to 17, and I was 10. They put me on the top bunk. 2 older girls were watching TV and smoking, as were the others, even the 9-year-olds. They looked at me rather strangely, being as I was the only white girl. So I got up on my bunk and started to talk to my dolls. The older ones told me to shut up, but I kind of ignored them. It made them mad, and they got up and pulled me off the bed, threw me on the floor, put a chair over me, and threatened to burn me with a cigarette. It was very quiet after that. Mary's reference to being the only white girl is just the tip of a very large iceberg of regional feelings on race and politics, partly because the hospital is located on tribal territory in a very conservative, predominantly white state, and partly because of the impact the hospital had on local economy in neighboring Dunseith. All that aside, and beyond a government Venus private industry argument, which remains perpetually unsettled, there is an important legacy to the abandonment of Sandhaven, which we'll get to in part 2. There was 1 bathroom for 20 women. In the bathroom, there was 1 tub, no shower, 2 stools, and 2 sinks. It wasn't long, and the older girls escaped, but they came back and brought head lice with them. When they brought the lice, they took us upstairs to a bathroom and had a shower stool in the sink and washed our hair with kerosene. My hair was down to my waist, and when my mom found out about our little bugs, she brought her neighbor and she cut my hair really short. It was the first time I had cut my hair short. I was moved nearly to tears as I read this, imagining a 10-year-old girl getting her hair cut short for the first time in this terrible place under such awful circumstances. I'm willing to speculate that the head lice were always blamed for the girls who escaped. Parasites like head lice were a continuing problem at places like Sandhaven in the 1960s. At any rate, on the subject of the older girls, Mary says they moved them to a different room or they escaped again, but I didn't see them around anymore. So that left us 4 girls in the room together, and we got our own beds. That's only the beginning of a story of a former patient of Sandhaven Sanatorium, a 10-year-old girl with a questionable TB diagnosis. When I asked Mary about her misdiagnosis, she was forgiving. They did not have the resources that we have now, but I don't blame my doctor for any of this because he knew it wasn't TB, but the state said we had to go. In part 2, Daily Life in Sandhaven, what Mary found on the 3rd floor and what it took to secure her release from Sandhaven. So he did a second part. So we're still continuing on with the same article. You just had to click next to go to part 2. So continuing on. In part 1, Mary, a former patient at Sandhaven Sanatorium, detailed her arrival at Sandhaven and the circumstances that led to her spending 5 months in the facility in 1963. Eventually, this 10-year-old from Carrington settled into her time at the massive hospital and learned how to keep herself safe. We never wandered the halls unless we told the nurses where we were going, so I did not associate with too many more of the residents. We knew there were men on the other hallway because we were never allowed on that end. We had to tell them when we wanted to go to the bathroom because we shared the bathroom with all the ladies on the end of the hall. As I told you before, no shower, just bathtub, 2 stools, and 2 sinks. Sometimes when I went into the bathroom, I would see blood in the sinks. I learned many things there, such as taking my own temp and my own pulse. We had to do this every day and sometimes twice a day. Once a month, they would stick a tube down my throat and bring up juices from my stomach to test for a live bug. They always came back negative. I never had TB. The 3rd floor was for severely mentally handicapped and for us to do our crafts. I do remember going up to the 3rd floor and peeking in the window and seeing several old people in cribs with just diapers on, crying and screaming. The door was locked, so we couldn't go in. We were not allowed on the 4th floor except to wash our hair in the small bathroom, and a nurse was with us at all times. We were able to go to the roof by elevator and get some fresh air and sunshine, and every once in a while the girls would lock me out and I would have to wait until the nurses would come back looking for me, or one of the girls felt sorry for me and let me in. On top of the roof was a room that the elevator was in and a door to the outside. So I got wise after a while and never left the building, so I was close to the elevator. That was the only sunshine we got when we went to the top. My friends and family came to see me, and I could only see them when I opened my window with bars. Adults were allowed in the building, but children weren't, which doesn't make sense because the adults didn't wear masks or gowns, so they could have taken this to the kids anyway, but that's how they did it back then. I asked Mary about the bars on the windows and the visiting restrictions. We weren't really allowed outside our room most of the time. The nurses would always tell us to get back into our room. We were not locked in our rooms, and our doors were open during the day, but they preferred us not to be outside our rooms except to go to the bathroom. When I think on it, it was a sort of like a prison, but as a kid and having a large room and a TV, I didn't think about it. There were bars on the windows because, as I said, the girls would keep escaping. But I think they just walked out the front door when all the visitors left. Not sure, and I didn't ask questions. The last month I was there was an older white woman there that was more like a grandmother. She was very kind, but we could only talk across the way from each other. I never went into her room, and she never came in ours. In one portion of an email, Mary compares the memories of Sandhaven with our photos like the garden and fountain and ones that grace the grounds. I don't remember any gardens or streams from the roof, but you have to remember I never got outside. I also don't remember any other buildings such as the children's wing. That wasn't there when I was. In the 70s and 80s, things had started to spiral down at Sandhaven, and Mary says the decline was already apparent when she was there in 1963. It was a very scary place to be then. I can imagine what it was later. The place should have been condemned back then. In the end, Mary's parents secured her release. My doctor and mom made them get me out of there. It took 4 months, and when mom threatened lawyers, that's when they released me. There was no live bug to work with, so they had to let me go. When I got out in July, I had to take 21 pills a day for 3 years so I wouldn't get TB. I'm still a carrier and always will be, as my sisters are also carriers. The legacy of the closure of Sandhaven and hundreds of other facilities like it around the nation is that we decided as a society that stuttering away other people for whatever purpose is very, very rarely necessary in a modern medical society. During that time, Mary was a patient. This facility hosted both contagious TB patients and developmentally disabled adults and patients with an array of other afflictions known by other names today. Banishing them to a place like Sandhaven, so understaffed and administratively mismanaged, it's just not the way we treat the vulnerable in our country today. It's hard to argue with a former patient. There were surely patients at Sandhaven who had a delightful time, and plenty of people who flatly deny there was anything at all wrong with the facilities like Sandhaven, despite plenty of documentation to the contrary. A topic we've addressed before, but in the end, facilities like Sandhaven were closed for a reason. There are those who disagree with it and who lost their jobs because of it, and that is unfortunate. However, a critical attitude toward human warehouses like Sandhaven shouldn't be seen as a swipe at the staff. To the contrary, we have the utmost respect for those who excel at exceedingly difficult jobs like those Sandhaven offered. It's executive and administrative decisions that led to the hospital staff pushed far beyond their capabilities. We're very grateful to Mary for sending her story in. In the end, the closure of Sandhaven simply means young girls like Mary will no longer have to endure what she went through, and that is a good thing. So crazy that she, even in that short amount of time, the abuse and just... I can't imagine being 10 years old and left there for 4 months, having to it's I can't even imagine it. It's so awful. So, I have another article, and some of these I did cut down just a little bit to, I think this one I left, but I have another one that I cut down just at spooky parts because we've heard the history multiple times now. So, the next one I have is called The Haunted North Dakota Sanatorium by Alyssa Knudsen. Knudsen. Oh God, those names kill me. And this was October 27th of 2001. So, quote, the Sandhaven Sanatorium is left abandoned with cases of paranormal activity. The Sandhaven Sanatorium, located in North Dakota, has been abandoned for years. However, some believe that those who died may still haunt the halls of the building. The sanatorium first housed patients in 1912. Not only trespassers and ghost hunters travel into its properties. The Sandhaven Sanatorium was originally created to treat and care for those with TB. TB is an infectious disease that can severely affect the lungs. At the time of discovery in 1882, TB had killed 1 out of every 7 people living in the U.S. and Europe. Starting in 1875, the U.S. started building sanatoriums to move these suffering from TB out of their homes, preventing the spread of the disease to other families. TB patients in the 1900s, prior to the creation of antibiotics, were treated with proper nutrition, fresh air, and sunshine. In the Sandhaven Sanatorium, they would place the patients' beds in front of windows to allow for their treatment. When it opened in 1912 in Dunseith, it only housed 12 patients, but quickly grew to 140 that same year. This location was chosen near Dunseith because of the high altitude, less snowfall, drier atmosphere, and favorable conditions for patients with TB. The building was solely used for TB patients up until 1957, when they built and opened the developmentally disabled, remaining the building the Sandhaven State School for the Feeble-Minded. The building eventually closed and patients were transferred to their individual community facilities. In 1989, the facility was abandoned by state officials, and shortly after, the land and building were purchased by the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa people. According to the Travel Channel, quote, the building was constructed on Chippewa land, which some eyewitnesses believe could be the root of the property's problems. The building has since had the reputation, unquote. The building has since had a reputation of being haunted by former patients and others who died on the property. According to the Minot Daily News, at least 1,000 people died at Sandhaven, with many buried on the property in unmarked graves. Those who enter the building have said that they have seen floating apparitions and have heard a baby cry on the property. Some who enter the building claim that they have been attacked by an unknown spirit and walk away from the building with injuries. According to the Travel Channel, quote, back in 2001, a 17-year-old fell 40 feet from the elevator shaft to his death, unquote. The site was also the location of a Ghost Adventure episode which aired in 2016. In the episode, the crews talk with others who have been affected on the site and explore the property themselves. They also recorded a spooky EVP on the property. Since the residents and state officials evacuated the facility, the abandoned building slowly deteriorated with time. From the beautiful facility that it was, vandals and lack of upkeep destroyed the property. Currently, the building is in ruins with broken windows, peeling paint, and fallen walls. The building contains controversy on the suspicious activity that now occupies the site. Some believe that mistreatment of patients occurred when the building was still open, although many former employees have come forward to denounce these theories. The property now marks one of the most haunted sites in North Dakota. According to the Travel Channel, the spirits are restless in this house of unimaginable pain and horror. The building is on private property and is not open to the public. However, there are still those who dare trespass on the property to see the mysteries of the haunted Sandhaven Sanatorium themselves. I have another one, sorry, but I cut it short because I took the history out because we've learned too much now. This is just called the Sandhaven Sanatorium, and it was on astonishinglegends.com. Quote, it is unsurprisingly believed to be one of the most haunted buildings in North Dakota. Hundreds of souls perished here, were mistreated here, and were forgotten about here. Those who walk the grounds, which without express permission from the owners is trespassing, have shared that they heard crying on the property, disembodied voices and footsteps, as well as seeing floating humanoid apparitions. It is also a general sense of dread and discomfort. that fall upon those who are in or near the buildings. Many of those left here are likely angry, and it is even said there have been some cases of a spirit or unknown entity attacking trespassers. Today, the buildings and their surrounding land are owned by the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa people. It's important to remember without permission, traveling here is considered trespassing. Additionally, urban exploring in older, uncared for buildings is extremely dangerous. In 2001, a 17-year-old young man was exploring the ground with his friends when he slipped and fell down an elevator shaft to his death. Please keep this in mind before thinking about urban exploring. Okay, lastly here. I don't know what I was going to say. I watched the Ghost Adventure episode, and it was creepy. It was really good. Zach was very dramatic in it. All kinds of stuff happened. But I suggest watching it. I thought it was good. And the noise, so many noises, so many EVPs, and it was creepy. It was definitely a creepy one. Highly recommend it. So during it, they, do the interviews first. One he was speaking with said that it was built upon an Ojibwe and Chippewa. At the time, Ojibwe and Chippewa owned a third of what would become modern-day North Dakota, which is, the sanatorium was built on top of it. They say there's a spirit, a trickster spirit, Nahobozo. I think I got it right. He's also a shapeshifter, and they believe that he roams the area and the land, and along with other Chippewa spirits. Also, there's evidence of satanic rituals that were practiced at this area. In the larger buildings, you can actually hear a ton of noise and doors slamming from the outside. And you can experience that in the episode. Like, they experience that. It's pretty crazy. They also have a graveyard with a ton of unmarked graves. They also call it a baby graveyard, which is so upsetting. But, when you walk through there, there's tons of holes and craters from the past when they would try to dig these people up. Not sure why, but yeah. So it's the 11th episode of season 13. Sometimes when you watch on Discovery Plus and all those, they don't match up with what you find online or whatever. But it was in December of 2016, I believe. So you can kind of search by date also. So they went to North Dakota to investigate the sanatorium. And Zach almost falls off the damn building because they're up at the top, and there's this kind of open hole, and there's no railing, no door, nothing. And he's literally walking around and almost fell off the building. And Aaron would have had it on camera. And just the whole time, very disturbing. Energies everywhere, tons of noises and EVPs. So I just kind of I found this online, which is so much easier than sitting and writing out every single note, because it can take a while to get through even a 30-45 minute episode. But this guy kind of summarized it, and so it's not in order of how it happened. It's just explaining kind of what happened while they were there. So there were unexplained noises. There were a ton of knocking, tons of random noises they couldn't pick out. So many footsteps and legit, it sounded so legit, and you can hear them very, very well. Bottle noises, they could hear bottles being thrown. It was super creepy. And rocks being thrown, and then just massive bangs. They took out a device that was called a puck device, where they got words like sneak, Norman, and found. And that I think that was with Billy asking questions of who was here, what's going on. They Aaron actually had physical contact after he went into one of the tunnels by himself. They have tunnels to go from building to building and transport patients because of how the weather in North Dakota. It gets very, very cold. And so after that, Aaron started feeling very panicked, very lightheaded. It was actually kind of creepy, scary. They took out the Ovilus device and they got Jesus, burn Jesus. So that's interesting. They heard disembodied voices. They heard a growl, which you can hear it, and it is a creepy ass growl. Like, you hear it in the moment. It's not like they went back. And then you hear a voice say hello, and it's like a very sweet, like, woman's voice. Hello? So they did have visual sightings. Zach saw a dark figure from one of the doors, and it caused him to drop his camera on the ground. He started panicking, and Aaron is trying to freak out what's happening. And they actually picked up something. So they reviewed the camera, and there was a dark shadow figure moving from right to left, and you can totally see it. Again, Aaron is getting hit with like physical harm, and it's affecting his body. Like, before he was super panicked, lightheaded, and then he felt like he was going to throw up. They did get a very creepy EVP. It says, "Don't wait. The light is near the tunnel." And the last word, I don't know if it's tunnel, but it's very, very, very creepy to listen to. Billy starts feeling heaviness in his chest as if he has tuberculosis. That's what the conclusion they came to. Aaron claims that a piece of wood was thrown at him, and Aaron was so affected by this because lastly here, he began to feel very emotional and very, very angry. So again, a very good episode. I highly recommend it because the EVP is amazing. The voices they get, the sounds, like a lot of the times the noise is just, you're not sure what it is, but the bottles and the knocking and the footsteps, super, super creepy. So yeah, highly recommend that. And that is all I have today on the Sand Haven Sanatorium in Dunseith, North Dakota. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you want to follow me on social media, I do not have Facebook anymore. I decided to delete it over Facebook. I was a part of the generation where it was invented, but lots of reasons, but I'm just kind of over it, and I've chosen to take myself off of it. I still have an Instagram. I just personally never post, but I do post on my Instagram for the podcast at Dark Tales from the Road. I have a Twitter, I have YouTube, and also a TikTok. YouTube, I do full episodes, so you can listen there if you'd rather do that. And TikTok, I do a small snippet of the episode to get you excited, So yeah, you guys can follow me there. If you'd like to support the show, I have a Patreon, and I'm excited. I think I've picked some really sweet topics, and I'm really excited for the things to come. Tomorrow, we're going to be exploring the Zodiac, and we're going to be looking at the strong Aries, the first of the Zodiac. So get ready for that. Then on the 29th, we're going to be going to Maryland. The 5th of April, I can't believe it's April already. Getting to April already, we're going to be going to New York to explore a cult, and I'm so pumped. And then April 12th, we'll be going to Massachusetts. April 13th, we'll have a bonus dark tale. April 19th, we're going to New Mexico. April 23rd is my Taurus. My baby boy is a Taurus, and my moon is a Taurus, so I'm pretty excited about that one. And then April 26th, we're going to Michigan. That is episode 46. I am almost to 50. How insane is that? Sorry, my corgi is the worst, seriously. But yeah, almost to 50. I can't believe it. I've wanted to quit so many times, but really enjoyed doing this, and I just can't express how much I appreciate the support that you guys give me and all the listens. And yeah, if you would like to go on to iTunes or Good Pods or Spotify and rate and review. I would massively appreciate that. But yep, that is all we have today. We'll see you tomorrow for a Zodiac episode about Aries. And I can't wait. I hope you guys have an amazing, amazing rest of your week. Thanks, guys.